When you think of rivalries, what comes to your mind? Competitiveness, hatred, emotion, or maybe even high stakes? These are basic needs for a rivalry to form naturally. But what happens when you try to force a rivalry, like the Texas A&M and South Carolina matchup, or the Arkansas-Missouri one? These are very newly formed annual games that have little to no history behind them. Let's ask ourselves, why is the NCAA trying to fabricate rivalries between schools that have little to do with each other? Well, actually, you first need to understand the last week of the regular season, Rivalry Week. This week is the exact persona of food, family, and football. On Thanksgiving, you can enjoy the Egg Bowl, a fierce rivalry between Ole Miss and Mississippi State for the state of Mississippi. The next day, on a Friday, you can enjoy the most played rivalry in NCAA Division I history between Minnesota and Wisconsin. And on Saturday, you can watch games like Ohio State and Michigan. Most call it the best rivalry in all of sports. Then you have games like the Iron Bowl, Kentucky and Louisville, or Arizona State versus Arizona. Why is this all important? Well, the root cause of all this, sadly, is money. The NCAA would love to draw in viewers to as many games as possible, so every team needs an opponent to play on Rivalry Week every single year. I believe the SEC is a perfect example of this. Starting in 1991, Arkansas and South Carolina moved into the SEC. And well, with a new conference comes new opponents. And how the SEC rules are made with the two divisions, each team needs an annual opponent from the other division. Like how Bama plays Tennessee every year, or LSU in Florida. So they made the Razorbacks and the Gamecocks permanent cross-division opponents. But South Carolina already plays Clemson on Rivalry Week. So that leaves Arkansas without a buddy on the last week of the season. LSU, up to this point, playing Tulane, a former SEC program, during Rivalry Week each year. Once the Hogs moved into the SEC, it made only sense to try and create a rivalry between the bordering states. And also these two programs having some history between each other, with Arkansas earning its team name the Razorbacks after a 1909 defeat of the LSU Tigers. Up until that game, Arkansas was called the Cardinals, but after the defeat of the Tigers, Arkansas coach Hugo Bezdek informed the crowd that his team had not performed like football players but like a wild band of Razorback Hogs. But if you would ask 100 LSU fans today who their biggest rival is in football, at least 99 of them would name someone other than Arkansas. They would tell you teams like Alabama, Florida, or even Ole Miss. So friends, this is what I would call a forced rivalry. Funny enough, this situation happens again in the SEC, involving most of the same teams, but this time around in 2012, with Texas A&M and Missouri deciding they want in on the fun in the SEC. This brings massive decisions for Rivalry Week, and what a weird decision it was for the SEC. They put Missouri in the East Division while putting A&M in the West Division. Sure, it's not the best geography, but we will live with it. And you would think since A&M and Missouri just came from the same conference together, they would be playing each other on Rivalry Week, or even become permanent cross-division opponents, right? No, not at all. They totally disregard the matchup between the two schools and giving them both interesting matchups to play. First, you have Missouri. And if you remember the rules, you need an opponent for a Rivalry Week and a cross-division opponent each year and every year. Well, out of all the teams, they made it simple for the Missouri Tigers and try and force a rivalry between Arkansas, and immediately creating a trophy called the Battle Line Rivalry and having the matchup the day after Thanksgiving. But wait, what about the LSU-Arkansas Golden Boot matchup the day after Thanksgiving? Well, after years of build-up and actual rivalry feel-like games, the SEC said screw it and gave LSU and Texas A&M a shot on Turkey Week. Forcing two brand new rivalries was a little awkward, but this gave the SEC hope to bring in more revenue. Now I will say this as an Arkansas fan, I find myself hating Missouri more and more as the years progress. So is forcing rivalries working? Maybe. Or maybe it's because my Hogs lose every year in the rivalry. Maybe it's a little bit of both. Oh, and also forgot to mention, the Aggies and the LSU rivalry have some history to it, so it's not terribly new, like the Arkansas-Missouri one. Speaking of the Ags, they need a cross-division opponent, and with Arkansas now facing Missouri every year, it only makes sense to give South Carolina to the Aggies, two schools who couldn't be any more different from each other. Fast forward to 2024, the SEC is once again facing rivalry decisions with Texas and Oklahoma joining. But this time around, we don't have to worry about the cross-division opponents, as the SEC has disbanded the two-division system. As it currently stands, while making this video, the SEC is a 16-team conference, and the top 2 teams will play for a SEC title. But this still begs the question of who Texas and OU will play on Rivalry Week. Sure, they are both joining as heated rivals, but they will have their matchup in October every year, just like Bama and Tennessee do. Well, this is an easy decision for Texas, as they are joining their in-state rival Texas A&M, so the SEC obviously gives the go-ahead for those two on Turkey Week. That leaves LSU without a buddy for the last week of the regular season. Many believe this could be the return of the Golden Boot rivalry happening the day after Thanksgiving. But since OU doesn't have anybody, they decided just to match those two up. And as much as I would have liked to see my Hogs play on LSU on Rivalry Week again, this matchup is very intriguing and definitely a must watch. I must admit the SEC knows how to bring in viewers. I think the weirdest of all these matchups has got to be the Aggies and Gamecocks by far. Sure, you have the fabricated matchups between Arkansas and Missouri, and also Arkansas and LSU, but these ones at least make a little more sense in terms of geography. Texas A&M and South Carolina are literal polar end opposites of the conference. Not only are they on the completely ends of the SEC, the culture gap between the two are insanely massive. What I hope to see in the future is a 4-pod system in the SEC, where each team is placed into a pod or division of 3 other teams based on history, geography, and rivalries. You would play 3 other teams every single year and rotate all other SEC teams. Now this could get very complicated, as many teams have many different rivalries that they would love to hold on to. Take Arkansas for example. You could say Arkansas has a rivalry with 4 different teams now in the conference: Texas, Texas A&M, LSU, and Missouri. Arkansas really doesn't have a so-called main rival, neither does LSU or a few other programs in the conference. Figuring out the 4-team pod would be insanely difficult, so maybe the right system is at play here. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I thank you for staying this long. Please let me know if you like this type of content by liking and subscribing, or telling me your opinions in the comments. And like always, I wish you a very well rest of your day.